Are you moving forward and back a little bit in your seat compared to the speaker?
We'll try to stay stationary here. How's that?
You'll have to speak.
Okay, let me continue. This meeting will be a meeting with several firsts. Our first annual meeting is the only neighborhood in the city that recognizes the Dakota name for one of the city's lakes, and appropriately a meeting that is taking place the day after Indigenous Peoples Day. This is the first meeting in the stunningly remodeled and expanded Bakken Museum. And
It sounded really garbled. I don't know if anyone else is having trouble, but
Yeah.
it's very, I know what you're talking about, but I can't distinctly hear the individual words, sentences.
Hi, we can't hear anything, and is the Zoom presentation also not working?
Okay, thank you for that feedback. We're working on the technical side of it here.
If it's only the three of you in the room, Alan, do you feel comfortable lifting your mask?
yeah, move down further too.
I think you're good. Nope, stay. Yeah. If you're comfortable with being 6 feet, you want to be as close to this as possible.
Michelle, make sure you're.
I have to keep letting people in. So, yep. And that's how the chat is. So.
Is there a problem being too close?
No.
Okay.
Try it again, Alan.
Okay. As I said before, this meeting will be recorded. And the meeting has several firsts. It's our first annual meeting as the only neighborhood in the city that recognizes the Dakota name for one of our city's lakes, and appropriately meeting taking place the day after Indigenous Peoples Day. And this is the first meeting in the stunningly remodeled and expanded Bakken Museum, and our first hybrid meeting, and the first meeting with the technical difficulties of a hybrid meeting. Hey, is there any way you can show more of the Bakken, including what's going on outside with the mobile?
I'm plugged in, but.
Yeah, I'm sorry, there are only 3 of us here in the Bakken to appreciate all this.
That's the outside area.
Puppet stage, the thing
If
they're
you don't
doing.
know the Bakken, you really need to come here and watch and look at it. We're meeting in the Great Hall on the 2nd floor.
No, kitty.
Okay.
Okay, before moving on to the main reasons we're all here, there are a few items of business that we need to take care of. First of all is approval of the minutes from our September board meeting. Somebody, any comments or corrections on the September minutes from board members? Richard?
Yeah, I can't see my documents now, but I think there's a place where I had said something about persuading young people to wear masks. I would like to suggest we amend that just to say persuade people to wear masks. And later on, there's a reference to a Zoom meeting, a webinar format on Zoom. I guess that's okay. I was thinking Zoom meeting and webinar format, but we're not doing that. But that's that was still accurate in the minutes. And the second bullet under light rail, I didn't write down with my the second bullet. Well, I'll talk to you afterwards.
Okay.
I'll talk to the coordinator afterwards about those. It's just a wordsmithing issue. So otherwise, I move approval.
Okay, we have a motion for approval as amended.
You can take your computer. This one's what's projecting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion to approve the September minutes carries. And next item is acceptance of the treasurer's report. John, do you have any comments?
We are on budget. Excuse me. We're on budget. We have $16,400 in our account, checking account.
Okay, thank you, John. Okay, next item is approval of West McCoska Neighborhood Council as the name for this incorporated nonprofit body. Following approval by the city of the neighborhood name change, our board approved applying with the state for a change to our corporate name. And I would now like to obtain resident approval for the change. Sid, I think you wanted to make a comment at this point on the name change?
Yeah, let me see if I put my, now you can see me?
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you, first of all, for including Dakota words within your name of your neighborhood area. I would also encourage you to think in the future about the possibility of including a reference to the water, because the words you have included are very good words. They're actually, the land is sacred. Makah is the land, and the land is sacred to we Dakota people. Ska means white. So in Made-Makaska, it refers to the white banks around the lake. So I think you'll just have to explain to people that you're obviously, on the west side of the lake, and Makaska is referenced with the white banks on the west side of the lake. But I want to thank you for the Dakota words, and encourage you in the future, I guess, to put together something just to explain what that means.
Thank you. Yeah, we will be working on a logo, and there'll be, I think, future opportunities to insert the word bidet and to make it clear that we're on the lake as well as on the land.
Could I ask a question? Alan, or could I ask a question? How about, I think, did you just say mudday when you were referring to water?
Well, there's two, there's mud day and bud day, and I know the issue has been bidet and its reference to a French word that has come up, but Made was the missionary pronunciation of lake.
Okay.
Bidet is the Dakota reference as developed by Dakota scholars and used by the University of Minnesota Dakota Studies Program, and being incorporated as sort of the way the Dakota saw it, and verses, not really verses, that the first non-Dakota saw it as mud day, the Dakota saw it as bidet. That's the difference.
Okay.
But it could
read
be
that.
either. It could be either. In
Okay.
that regard.
I had read that either one, and I wondered why they went with bidet versus mudday. And so that explains it. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Sid, while we're on the subject of correct Dakota names, would you say the best pronunciation for our lake is Makaska or Makaska?
Makaska.
Thank you.
Makaska.
You've seen in the press different,
Right,
but thank you.
thank you. Can I also add, thank you, I've heard you speak a few times, and I've always enjoyed it. We're planning to do, and also some of this in concert with the Bakken, more natural area study here, taking advantage of the lake, of the waters of the lake, of the wildlife, and so on. So those are more opportunities to bring in more the traditions and language of your people when it comes to this area going forward. You understand what I said, ruffle through the mask?
Can you hear us, Sid?
I didn't, what's the question?
No, it wasn't a question. I was just saying that we're going to be doing more supporting more studies of the natural area here in the vicinity of the lake. And that'll give us more opportunity to use indigenous language in reference to.
Yeah, that would be terrific. As some of you know, or maybe all of you that are there, after we first started working with the city, actually with the city first around the history of the lake, we immediately started working with the Bakken Museum. So the Bakken Museum was the first organization or institution to acknowledge the Dakota land around the lake in the plaques that are out on the patio. The upper patio acknowledges, and it does use the word Bade Makaska because it worked with my family and others who were working on bringing back the Dakota pronunciations. And then, of course, you've got a medicine garden there adjacent to the lake off of the Bakken.
Right. So to wrap this discussion up, we appreciate your input, Sid, and we'll try to as we teach about the name change, to talk about the lake as well as the land. So at this time, we'd like to go before the entire neighborhood, all residents here, for approval of the change of our neighborhood council name to the West Makaska Neighborhood Council. It's kind of a formality after the city has changed our name, but just to make sure we're consistent with state law as to how names are changed, I'd like somebody to make a motion, and it could be a member of the public as well as a board member, to change the name of our neighborhood council.
I'll move it if somebody from the public has a hard time.
So move.
Seconded.
Good.
Who is that seconded?
My name's Teresa Paschke. I'm a
Thank you.
resident of the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any further discussion, or shall we call a vote on the official change of the neighborhood council? Okay, hearing no further discussion, all in favor of the change of our neighborhood council to the West Makaska Neighborhood Council, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Okay, we can say it's unanimously carried, and we will now go to the State Secretary of State to ask that name change be made official. Item on our agenda is board elections.
Okay, and then really quick, I just wanted to read a note by Meg Forney. She said the statement being on stolen land has been referenced more recently. Would parks be considered returned to Dakota?
That's to you, Sid.
I didn't understand the last sentence.
Okay, the last sentence is, would our parks be considered returned to Dakota?
By renaming it, by what? I don't understand the
And
question.
it's public access. In other words, all people are able to enjoy our parks. Would that? I'm just trying to think of in the Dakota tradition, and also historically, the lands were Dakota, and I'm just wondering. I just would like a thoughtful discussion on that. If you have a way to
Can I comment on that? Can I comment on that?
Yep, please.
Yeah, what I was saying earlier, for me as a Dakota, what that means is you're acknowledging it historically as Dakota land. That doesn't mean that over time things have changed as they do, but they're acknowledging, you know, the inhabitants that were here historically, and from which, you know, the name of the lake now, et cetera, has come.
It's
But it's still obviously a park, and
it's a recognition, you're saying. It's a
yeah, it's a recognition. It's a land acknowledgement of the indigenous people. This is a international movement happening around the world. Is that indigenous land is being acknowledged now in different ways in different locations, and using Dakota words, you know, telling stories, doing research. All of that is part of acknowledgement.
And embracing. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for bringing that up, Meg. Okay, then, moving on to board elections. Is Ann Webster here?
She is, yep.
Okay, Ann, I understand that you're interested in running for a seat on the board. Is that, am I right there?
I am. Can I you know, I had some I am very interested. I have some hesitations though that I want to be upfront about. We're in, you know, this has been, I'm in transition, AKA finalizing my divorce.
I'm learning about just that Zoom meeting that I showed.
Hello?
You're still there.
We're here, yep.
So if there's a possibility, a strong possibility that we would be we will be moving out of this building within the year. This is my daughter's school zone area, so we'll most likely be moving somewhere very near. But if it's outside of the neighborhood boundaries, I wouldn't be able to fulfill the full year. So I'd like to do it, or if there is anyone else who's interested in picking up the seat, should I go? Or am I allowed to continue my responsibilities for the entire year? I mean, I guess a little more, if I could get a little more guidance on that.
Sure. First of all, the board is authorized to have 11 members. Right now, after this meeting, we're only going to have 8, so we would be happy to have up to three more people on the board. And if you move from the neighborhood, we thank you for your service, for the time you spent on the board, and hope you would use that experience to join the board in your next.
Well, I like, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not promoting myself well at all. I'm a.
Okay. Why don't you just tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you do it?
I grew up in Minneapolis. I grew up in Longfellow and left for college and came back to raise my kids. I've been a public school teacher here, and I lean, you know, I'm involved in my, I like being involved in my local government in whatever way I can. And I've got a 14-year-old daughter who, you know, it's going through the pandemic that we're going through. I see lots of, I'd like to create more opportunities for rebuilding Minneapolis. I know a lot of it's ugly sides that need fixing, and it can feel overwhelming to me. I love this city and I love the people in it, and I guess this is my way of feeling like I'm engaged in doing what I can in my own neighborhood with my neighbors, and I think that's where we start.
Okay, great. I appreciate your desire to serve the city and the neighborhood. So Shall I put you down as a candidate for?
Put me down as a candidate. My feelings won't be hurt if I don't get it. I'd really like to get volunteering and more active, especially.
My feelings will be hurt if you don't get it.
Say that again.
My feelings will be hurt.
They will.
I want another educator on the board. Thanks.
What's that? Okay.
Okay, great. Is there anybody else from the neighborhood who would like to serve on the board? Okay, hearing none, what I'd like to do at this time is have the board members introduce themselves to the neighborhood. Very quickly, those who wish to run for another term. I'll start with myself. I'm Alan Campbell. I've lived in the neighborhood for 7 years, served on the board for 6 years, and I'm currently the board chair. Lynette is the vice chair. Do you want to just say a few words yourself?
Okay. Hi, my name is Lynette Davis Beresca, and I am currently at home because I just tested COVID positive. Yeah, I've been on the board for a few years now, and it's a great opportunity. So if there's anybody else there that wants to join us, we'd love to have you. So I have 3 boys. I should say I have 3 boys that we raised in Minneapolis, actually in Linden Hills, just on Xerxes, and now we're in the West Pecosca neighborhood, and have been for about 7 years. So, yeah, I hope more are interested.
Okay, thank you, Lynette. John, as our treasurer, do you want to say a few words about yourself and why you're serving?
Sure. John Boardwell. I've lived here 5 years, been on the board about 3. I have the treasurer's job, which is really pretty easy, but I find it interesting in all the subjects we debate and get involved in, and I encourage other people to do the same.
Great. Richard, you want to speak next?
Yeah, hi, my name is Richard Logan. My wife Carol and I have lived in the neighborhood for 15 years. I've been on board 10. During most of those years, I've been the safety head in the neighborhood. We have a joint arrangement safety-wise with the Sidna neighborhood. I was vice chair for a few years, going back a few years, but safety keeps me pretty busy. And I do hope that we can get a broader, somewhat more representative group of people on the board. But it's a wonderful group to work with, so I strongly recommend the experience of being on this council. It's a great experience.
Thanks, Richard. Martha, you've served on our land use team reviewing applications. That's been very useful given your background as an architect. Anything else you'd like to say in words of introduction?
I was just trying to think about this. I lived around Madae-Makaska since 1982 with a little break in there of maybe about 10 years. But most of my married adult life and my unmarried adult life. And I am a retired architect. I did mainly residential architecture. And I came to a board meeting and ended up on the board. And I'm still happy I did it, so.
Okay, great. And I think that Paul, you're next.
Hi, my name is Paul Legler, and I've lived in the neighborhood 6 years. I think I've been on the board about 2.5 or 3 years. And two of my primary interests, I guess, would be to ensure that the development that's occurring here is done in a responsible way with appropriate neighborhood input. And second of all, that we're trying to get a park or small park or playground put in so the children have someplace to play. So those are my 2 major issues.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Yeah, and very instrumental in helping move us toward a neighborhood park. let's see. Dave Stogard is not able to be with us tonight. He intends to run for another term. Dave has been helpful in monitoring the light rail construction, along with myself as a member of the construction information work group that is keeping tabs on the disruptions caused by the light rail construction. And Michael Sanders, I understand your duties at the Bakken are going to keep you from running for another term. Any chance we can convince you to change your mind at this late date?
It's been a challenge. As you know, arts and culture institutions are enormously challenged during COVID, and I have the secondary challenge of having my boys, 9 and 12 years old, both distance learning. And my wife is a special education educator in the schools, and so she has to go into work. So I'm at home trying to navigate 2 boys through distance learning and still trying to keep a museum running when nobody can gather in groups. So it seemed like a time where I kind of need to focus elsewhere. But I do, for those community members who are listening or maybe thinking about it, I would recommend being on this board. I've really enjoyed it and learned a lot. And I still intend for the Bakken Museum to be an active participant in the neighborhood group.
Okay, well, thank you for your couple years of service, and also thank you for your role at the Bakken, which is our outstanding institution serving both our neighborhood and the community at large. Okay, with that, unless there are any more last-minute candidates, I think we have
Victoria.
Victoria, sorry about that. Victoria, yes.
So, Alan, does this mean you don't want me on the board anymore?
No, just means I didn't write your name down on my little list here. But please, I assume that you wish to stay on the board for another year. So just if you want to say a couple words about yourself.
Sure. I'm Victoria Hoschel. I've been on the board for, I think, about 3 years. I've lived in West Calhoun for over 13 years, and before that I lived in Kenwood for 15 years. And I joined the board because, similar to Paul, I was very concerned about the development going on and the need to preserve our green space. So those have been my primary goals in the board. I'm on the land use committee. I am also helping launch a social media campaign to promote wearing masks, and then we'll also be heading up the rebrand with our name change and a new website, renewed website. So I am a marketing professional. I'm a marketing director at Optum. We're part of United Health Group. And so I'll be bringing that experience to bear on those 2 projects. I think this is a good board. I think the people are very dedicated and really passionate about trying to protect and advance the neighborhood. So I would advise it as a positive experience.
Great, thank you, Victoria. So we have 8 board members who wish to run for second term, and we have Anne, who would be the 9th. Do we have a motion to elect these 9 board members for a 1-year term?
Oh, wait. It's a little untoward for somebody who's running to move that, right?
Oh, right, yeah. Any resident can make that motion if you.
I move that we elect these 8. Am I correct? 8.
Actually 9. 8 existing board members and 1 new board member. So total of 9.
Okay. I move that we go forward with electing the 8 existing and 1 new board member for a total.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, congratulations all. You've been reelected, and Anne, welcome.
Welcome, Anne.
Welcome, Anne.
Thank you, thank you.
Continue to consult with your very creative 14-year-old daughter.
Yes, really. That.
I didn't hear that. What was that?
To consult with your 14-year-old daughter, he says. Keep her involved too.
She's got a lot of good ideas. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Okay, next item on our agenda is a discussion of spending plan. One of the major responsibilities of the board is to decide how best to use neighborhood revitalization funds that are given to all neighborhoods by the city. Michelle, can you show us that chart that shows how we've spent these funds in the past?
Yep.
Okay.
Hold on, they can't see that yet. Hold on, take me just a second. Okay.
Okay, could everyone see this list of how we've spent our money? Anybody who can't see it? Okay, then. Yeah, as you can see, we've spent $45,000 in support of the city as a whole, as it's faced both COVID and the response to George Floyd's police killing. We've spent very little in our own neighborhood, largely because of barriers the city, the county, and the park board have thrown up as we have proposed improvements to our green space or streets. As a result, we have almost $300,000 still available to spend. We've been working on plans for a bird and pollinator sanctuary that Martha has been leading. This would be at the south end of our green space along Today-McCoska. But at this time, I welcome any new ideas from residents. You know, if you have anything to suggest that we should be spending our neighborhood revitalization plan funds on.
Are we able to do anything with the sidewalks around the lake? I know this has came up in the past, but that's something that I wanted to bring back to the table.
You know, we have explored doing things with sidewalks, not along the lake, city sidewalks. There's always been problems because the city has a long-term plan and our sidewalks are not at the top of the priority list. But certainly we can look in.
There's a strip on our side where they had to cut it off and people are going on the grass, which has now turned to dirt. And if there's ever any rain, it's all slippery. So I'm actually concerned for like safety in that area.
So I wonder if we could contribute to park board budgeting financing.
I think we probably could. It's something we should be talking to, well.
We brought this up to Brad when he did come to one of our meetings last year. We brought that up, that it was crumbling into the lake. And
right.
With the quality of the lake that it has been, you know, to have this oil-based product falling into the lake is probably also not Meg.
Would you like me to speak to that?
Yes.
Okay. I actually asked staff to give me some updates on things. And so I'll just tell you that, that at present there is no capital plans for that sidewalk. First of all, there's a number of issues impacting the segment of the failed trail. And so it would need to be done to repair that part of the shoreline. So it might even be a whole situation of moving the sidewalk away from the shoreline. Anyway, depending upon where it's going to be and everything like that, at this point, we don't have any capital plans, but see now, with integrated data set, we will then populate a detailed work plan for 2021 and a scope of work annual schedule for 2022 and beyond. So
I still want to push that in the meantime, before we're looking at that long-term plan, that there needs to be something temporary or because it's already dangerous. I even get scared, and I am a younger individual on the trail, and it does scare me sometimes. And I've seen like a child on a bike, and it's hard for them to get across. And
if I hear, you know, what you're saying, if there is a possibility, I mean, I know The organization has tried numerous times to, shall I say, spend or invest your funds. I will, put forth that, there is a possibility of some funding here, whatever. But if for, as you're indicating, possibly something temporary. So I'll forward, those thoughts.
Thank you, Meg.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we will be following up on this between now and our next meeting. And we also have almost $80,000 available in community participation funds, which are intended to enable neighborhood residents to participate in city decision-making and promote communications between residents and neighborhood associations. Because many people still seem unaware of the dangers of spreading COVID by being maskless in public places, especially in closed places in apartment buildings and condominiums. We've been looking for ways to communicate a safety message that can be used in this neighborhood and other neighborhoods throughout the city. We've received a couple of proposals for a social media campaign to encourage mask wearing. And our communications team has selected one proposal for which they would like to seek board approval. Victoria, would you like to expand a bit on the proposal that we're seeking approval for tonight?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Ellen. There's some background noise somewhere. What did you ask me?
Yeah, I was just talking about the proposal we have for the mask wearing social campaign. If you could expand upon the proposal and you or someone else from the board, if you wish to make a motion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have sourced some options for agencies to help us launch the social media campaign to promote mask wearing. The campaign will be targeted specifically to the 5541 zip code. So essentially our West Calhoun neighborhood. We will have different copy and creative versions for different age groups. And the goal is to run it for a month to a month and a half and then assess what kind of engagement we get. The campaigns will promote specific videos on the importance of wearing masks. So they'll see a social post, they'll click on it, they'll come to a landing page on our website where there will be probably 2 videos that we will not produce, but we will provide access to. And then there'll be some more information and other COVID resource links on that page. So the idea is to really, again, get engaged, especially the younger generation who aren't as concerned, at least they don't appear to be, about wearing masks, and educate them. We'll be able to measure our engagement quite well. And if the campaign is successful, it could be rolled out to other neighborhood councils in the city who also want to promote it. So I would consider this initial campaign a pilot. And again, we'll run it for a month to a month and a half on Facebook and Twitter primarily. So that's the plan. And we've vetted several agencies, as Alan mentioned, and the agency that we've selected is LTR Digital. They have done quite a bit of social. They've worked with nonprofits and we've vetted them. I've interviewed their clients and I think they're a good choice. So that's the plan right now. Alan, do you have anything, is there anything else I haven't covered?
No, I think that covers it. If you want to put that in the form of a motion, I think we talked about $8,000 in total, which would include support to LTR and possible purchase of images and videos. If you want to put that in the form of a motion, I think that's what we need.
Yep, I move to request that the board approve the proposal from LTR Digital for this campaign. As Alan mentioned, the cost will include their agency fees, the media buy, and a part-time staff person to help me with the campaign and make sure it gets executed properly. So that's my motion.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Is that Lynette?
Yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion before we take a vote?
Yep, I just want to say thank you, Victoria, for the work that you've done so far.
Oh, thank you.
I'll second that.
Second that.
And you are now a member of the board. You are eligible to vote on this also.
I just want to add, this is very timely because with the winter months coming, more and more people are going to be spending more time indoors, encountering more people in enclosed spaces. So wearing masks in indoor public settings is critically important.
We'd like to get
Yeah,
this
I think that's a good point, Richard. And you know, because we'll be able to turn this fairly quickly, I think we can easily put that seasonal spin on the messaging.
Great.
I would like to add, just if I could add real quick, interrupt rather. I'm sorry. This is something that both my daughter and I are interested in getting involved in, putting whatever, you know, we're good grunt workers here. But I need to, after the vote, I need to leave the meeting briefly. We have parent-teacher conferences tonight with Minneapolis Public Schools, and there's a little, I've got to catch a meeting that had to be rescheduled, and I apologize profusely, but I can be right back on after that conference, and I won't leave until after the vote. Is that?
Okay, the question has been called. All in favor? Say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any board members opposed? Okay, if not, we have approved the contract and associated costs with LTR. And that, I think, takes care of all of our official business for the evening. So I think now it's time for a history lesson from our featured speaker, Syd Beane. Syd, I didn't really get a chance to introduce you when you were speaking and teaching us about the Lake Name, but I believe you were born on the Sioux Reservation in South Dakota, and that you're of both Sioux and Dakota parentage. I understand you've been a lifelong educator, activist, and organizer for American Indian concerns, both locally and nationally, and that you are one of the country's leading authorities on the forced relocation of American Indians from rural reservations into cities. Is that a fairly accurate description?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Okay, with that.
I'm pretty old too. Been around for a long time.
Yeah, a lot of us are. Okay, we got you here. We've got the mayor speaking after you, but we could certainly give you 15 minutes to give us a little talk and maybe answer a question or two.
Okay, thank you. The way we speak when we're honored by the opportunity to talk and share anything about ourselves and our history is we always say Hamatakiapi. Matakiapi means all my relations. All my relations refers not only to the people, but to everything. That our spiritual stories tell that we came from the stars. We came from the Kanshala, which is the grandfather sky. And grandfather sky met with Kushimaka, which is grandmother earth. And through the first medicine, which is Mani, water, life was created here. And so that's why land and sky and water are so important to our history, our well-being. Many people refer to us as the first environmentalists. My great-grandfather, who became a medical doctor and whom I made a film about, some of you may have seen it, Ohiasa, the Soul of an Indian, went to Dartmouth University. He was one of the first, if not the first Native American to write from the Native American perspective in English. When we went there, the people at Dartmouth said, oh, we know who he was. He was one of the first environmentalists. So that's what a lot of our words and relationships relate to. When I say Matakiapi and introduce myself, I'm introducing myself to everything and see everything in relationship to each other. In addition to that, I guess, as a Dakota person who, according to Ancestry.com, is 70% Dakota, I'm made up of the villages that are closest to the Twin Cities. And those villages were first the old village, which historically has been identified as then Pinachon's village. And Pinachon's village was the village that Cloudman came from. So Cloudman descended from the original old village that the Dakota people who came to this area. And those Dakota people that came to this area were made up of what we call the 7 council fires, or the 7 bands of the Dakota people. The Bedewakantawan, which was the old village, and the people who settled here first, is the village and the tribe, you know, that I belong to, and that my children and grandchildren, you know, belong to. So, but in effect, I'm not just a descendant of one village, but I'm descendant of the others. So Black Dog was also a relative.
Hey, that name Black Dog's racist. Hey, that's racist.
Black Dog
Where did that come from?
refers to the animal black dog. And Sapa is the word for black. So Sapa refers to the Black Hills. So Sapa is a very spiritual word. Black, all of our words are spiritual, like I said. I mean, white is spiritual, black is spiritual. I wear the colors that designate all of our people. All these colors, from black to white to red to yellow, are seen in a circle as related to each other. None more important, none bigger, none smaller. They're all equal, you know, in the spiritual world. So Black Dog, the word is English, and English may have seen it, that color in a different perspective, but the Dakota people saw all colors as equal. So, but one of the villages that became known as Black Dog Village was where Cloudman served as the head soldier, or he was the general when he resided in Black Dog Village. The other village is Little Crow's village. And Little Crow is recognized as being the elder who was called upon to lead the Dakota in the Dakota uprising. So obviously some people have mixed feelings about him, but he's buried in the same cemetery as my mother and father, my sister, my grandfather, my grandmother, my great-grandfather, all in the Presbyterian Native American Cemetery on the Flandreau Santee Sioux Reservation, South Dakota. So I'm very, very connected to the people who were here and to the history that was here, both before the Dakota War and after the Dakota War, being my family was exiled from Minnesota after the Dakota War. Therefore, I grew up on the reservation where Little Crow is buried near Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So you have these different villages and these different village groups. So I'm Bedewakantawan on my Flandreau Santee Sioux side. I'm Wahpeton on my Sisseton Wahpeton side. That's another reservation. called the Lake Travis Reservation now in South Dakota. And that was on my mother's side. On my father's side, I'm Yankton, Dakota. And that refers to the Yankton Reservation in South Dakota as well. So that makes up 70% of me. And Yankton, my dad was a direct descendant of Blue Cloud, who was the last designated chief of the Yankton people. And the other 30%, which is fascinating to a lot of people and little known, is I'm a direct descendant of several fur traders. I'm a direct descendant of Jean-Baptiste Faribault, who was one of the first fur traders to come and settle here. He was asked by the people who were building Fort Snelling to come and establish a trading post at Mendota as a way to build a relationship with both the fort and with Dakota and Ojibwe people who were involved in the trading business, which was the economic system that grew out of the relationships between the Europeans and others who came amongst the Dakota and Ojibwe people here, who followed the waterways and lived very, very much then economically off of the fur trade. So Pinachon was also a fur trader who married into the Dakota people. As a result, the old village was named after him, Pinachon. So I'm a direct descendant of both of those fur traders. My middle name is Dixon, and I'm a direct descendant of Robert Dixon, who was also one of the early Scottish fur traders that came down here from Canada. And he actually fought with the British against the United States in the War of 1812 and led the Dakotas and the other tribes in the two initial victories in that war. But as we know, eventually the United States prevailed and Robert Dixon became a citizen of the United States. He had a son named William Dixon, who actually I'm named after. William Dixon was one of the guides of Nicollet. And as we know, Nicollet was one of the early people who surveyed and mapped this area. Therefore, we have Nicollet Avenue, which is pretty well known within the city. So I'm a direct descendant of the Dixons as well. My last name is Beane, and people ask me, well, where does Beane come from? Beane comes from Jonathan Beane. Jonathan Beane was also a graduate of West Point. As I'm a descendant of 3 graduates of West Point, and Jonathan Beane was the first one I'll mention. He came up from St. Louis, and he surveyed the boundary line between the Dakotas and the Ojibways, which was the first effort to establish territorial recognition on the part of the United States to try to get the Dakota and the Ojibwe to work together around the fur trade and not compete territorially for the fur trade and take on a full life of peace, where before that there were times of peace and times of challenge over the territory between those two groups. So I'm a direct descendant of Jonathan Beane.
Giving kind of a presentation about the history of the
yeah, so this is all a history lesson for you. And the other is I'm a direct descendant of Seth Eastman. Many of the military officers also married into the villages that I'm mentioning here. Seth Eastman eventually became commander of the fort, the most recognized painter of the Dakota people, one of the most recognizing painters of the early frontier, and he designed the state seal of Minnesota. So not only is Minnesota, a Dakota word, which refers to the cloud, the water was so clear that you could see the clouds in it. And Bede-Makaska is now a Dakota word. And Minneapolis is half Dakota. The people that I represent on all of these sides are as Dakota as you can get. And that's one of the reasons the Minnesota Historic Society and Ramsey County Historic Society have sort of adopted my family. And we've done books, we've done films, we've done articles, and I now have been contracted for another book to be completed by the year 2021, which would be the 12th book of my great-grandfather Charles Eastman, who was named after Seth Eastman, who wrote 12 books and was one of the founders of the Boy Scouts. So if you want to look at this history across the state, understand Bedeh-Makaska, understand Cloudman Village. We worked with the parks, which were amazing. Meg was very supportive. Have a lot of respect and regard and thanks for Meg. That whole board that committed to restoring history. I've continued to work with the city and the parks on waterworks. I'm advising on that project. We're advising on Fort Snelling and the new visitor center. All of that will restore the history that was lost when the Dakota people were removed from the state of Minnesota.
Okay,
so one of the things I asked the people who asked me to speak, I asked you to consider following up on the state's commitment to repeal the Dakota Removal Act. Governor Pawlenty, when he was governor, approved along with the state legislature and requested by resolution the federal government to repeal the Dakota Removal Act. So my people all over the various states and in Canada would feel good about coming back to Minnesota and be welcomed back here. And so the other is to consider the doctrine of discovery. My family spent a whole afternoon meeting with the Basilica at their request not too long ago. And they're looking at the whole history of how the Basilica and Hennepin Avenue and St. Anthony Falls should be recognized in the future. So we'll be working also with the Basilica. So thank you for the opportunity to share a few thoughts and words about history, but read the books we're working on, the films we're doing, and the articles we're doing, and you will find a much broader perspective. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Don't have time for questions, but maybe depending on how the evening goes, maybe we'll have time for questions later. But I believe we have Mayor Jacob Frey online. Mayor, are you there?
I am here. Thanks so much for having me.
Great.
Well, Mr. Mayor, thank you for all the support as well.
Yeah.
You got it. And I don't have as good of a backstory as you do. I'm not aware of any ancestors that I have that were involved in the fur trade, and I'm certainly not an ancestor of Faribault or anything else, but that was fascinating to hear.
Thank you.
And you've certainly, in the short time, well, almost 3 years that you've been mayor, you've been dealing with more crises and tragedies than most Minnesota mayors have over many terms. So we thank you for being here with the second time you've been before us, first time online, and we'd love to hear an update about your latest thinking on the many issues before the city.
Absolutely, and I am honored to be here. I believe for the second time now. You are correct. At now the West Makaska Neighborhood Council. Is that the official name yet, or is that an action that's being taken today?
We just voted to take that action today. We just have to put it before the Secretary of State to make it official.
Well, let me first say congratulations on making that move. I do believe that it is the right one, honoring our Native community and their ancestral lands here. You know, I think it's yes, a symbolic gesture, but at the same time, I think a very important one. And so very much appreciative of your work and your willingness to step in there. I also want to recognize a lot of the very real work that this particular neighborhood council is doing on a very regular basis. You know, my staff have informed me about your investment with YouthLink and working with homeless kids, your advocacy for neighborhood environmental issues and specifically the water at Bedeh-Makaska, your work to bring more green space to the neighborhood, and of course the constant collaboration that you have to set up happy hours during, of course, non-COVID times, and making sure that you're engaging all of your residents. It's a big deal, and it's work that your council member or myself can't possibly be on top of every single last micro detail. And so having these neighborhood associations do this very, very critical work is so important. I just want to say thank you. And in addition to that, I'm very aware of your $25,000 grant towards the COVID response fund. And I believe another $25,000 grant to both East Lake and West Broad in response to some of the unrest that we saw following George Floyd's killing. And, you know, just from this introduction, I think it's apparent. We have had a series of crises that have indeed been sandwiched on top of one another. You know, we've had obviously a global pandemic, an economic downturn, the killing of George Floyd and the subsequent unrest. And then there's another epidemic in many respects of loneliness, where people just aren't able to have that normal human interaction, that normal physical touch that you often get and that human beings crave. And so times have been tough. They've been tough all around. And yes, we are most definitely feeling the pinch in many ways at the city. And, you know, it's my view that we need to make these tough, at some times controversial, but very necessary decisions in order to get through these series of crises that are stacked on top of one another. We've had a $200 million budget shortfall. We need to do the necessary both culture shift and deep structural change of our police department. And we still need to have a police response when you call 911. And balancing and managing all of these numerous different pieces all at once has most definitely been tough, but you know, we're up for the task. And as I promised from the very beginning, when COVID-19 hit, you know, we're going to continue to deliver these core city services with excellence. And I've made sure to communicate to all of our department heads that this is a new reality right now. This is a new normal. You're going to have to reorganize your departments to deal with the necessary budget cuts. We are not going to just put this all on the backs of property taxpayers, especially when they're already feeling the burden of the economic downturn themselves. We need to ensure public safety and at the same time get that deep structural change in the department. And we need to recover. And so, you know, I don't know if there's time for questions. I'm certainly happy to answer them. But a couple pieces that I do want to touch on. One is our Minneapolis Forward Coalition. This is the coalition that is built around recovery, of course, rebuilding, and then transformation. This is the coalition that's centered on perhaps doing things differently than we ever have before. This is a coalition that we've helped create, but is outside the city. And so they have the necessary support system in place, so they are backed and supported by the city, but they don't need to work through the traditional bureaucracy that is the city government. And it helps them to get monies as quickly as possible to the places that need it most. We've invested $2 million in getting a quick rubble clearance to make way for new economic growth and development. We've invested another $5 million in making sure that some of the wonderful small businesses that have been along these corridors to begin with can thrive, can make it, and can hopefully purchase the real estate on which their business is presently located. That work through recovery will undoubtedly continue through quite some time. And at the same time, we're doing the necessary work to ensure culture shift of the Minneapolis Police Department. The chief and I have enacted a series of reforms ranging from overhauling entirely our use of force policy to incorporating de-escalation into everything that we're doing, including the reporting structure. We've made sure to make a series of policy changes, advocate over at the state legislature for changes to arbitration, and we're presently undergoing negotiations in the union contract, which I will be very clear is an impediment. It needs to be changed if we're going to see that full and necessary accountability that we know that we all need. And safety. You know, I believe that the chief is speaking just shortly after I am, and so I won't steal too much of the excellent work that he's doing, but you know, I'll say the chief and I are lockstep. We talk several times a day. I think that relationship between mayor and chief is absolutely critical, especially during times that are as tumultuous as what we've been seeing. And you know, we are fully committed So, I could keep going on and on and on. I'm happy to continue talking, but I did want to leave some time for questions if there were any, because I wanted to hear from really the excellent members on the call.
Yeah, we do have about 4 minutes for questions before the chief scheduled to speak.
Perfect. First off, congratulations on your new baby. That is awesome. And thank you so much for your presentation here. We have one question here. What is the update on the Minneapolis Police Department budget and potential shortfall in officers?
Thank you for the question. So we have seen some attrition this year that surpasses what we normally see. Normally on an annual basis, we see somewhere in the range of 45 officers leave for a variety of reasons, including retirement and resignation or termination. This year, that number has surpassed 100. The chief can probably give a more accurate accounting for where exactly we are, but it's right around 117 to 120. And undoubtedly, that decline in numbers has an impact. And so the chief and I made a very, I'll call it a painful but not difficult decision. Many of these decisions we're making right now, they are painful in that it'll be not what it's perhaps goes outside the norm, but it's very clear what the right decision is. And in this case, we had to divert units from within MPD, namely the community engagement team that does incredible work, the Police Athletic League, which also we love, and a few others, to do that more traditional 911 response and investigative work. The reason we were doing this is that serious times call for serious measures, and given the attrition that we've seen, we had to do a bit of reorganization and restructuring within the department. Now, as for the budget for next year, there are 3 new recruiting classes that we have in fact budgeted for. That will help with some of the attrition. Notably, with police, you can't, it's not necessarily a monetary issue in that we can't simply pay for a new officer to come online and immediately get that officer. You have to recruit them, you have to train them, you need to make sure that they are of the right mindset and mentality to take on this very, at times, difficult job. And we want to make sure that our chief himself has the opportunity to review every single one of the individuals and applications that are coming on board to make sure that they are of the right caliber and of the right mindset. So that is the present state, but we've certainly got a whole lot of work left to do.
Thank you.
Okay, time for one more question, perhaps?
Yeah.
Anybody in our...
I'll be a little shorter next time, so maybe we can get 1 or 2 more beyond that.
All right, one more just came in. Traffic congestion on West Lake Street and Excelsior is horrible, especially from 3 to 6 during the work week. How can the city approve more construction for apartments and condos in this area when we don't have the roadway and infrastructure to support such growth?
It's an excellent question. As far as the traffic goes on West Lake, clearly it's a major corridor within our city. I'd be surprised if the traffic numbers were the same as they were pre-COVID-19, but that's not to delegitimize the concern. Certainly, as we regain our sort of economic vitality, as people start going back into work, then I have a feeling that congestion, if anything, will probably increase to some extent. Every one of these projects is different, and so I hesitate to comment on any specific one of them as far as the approval process goes. But it certainly is an area that has grown substantially over the last couple of years, last 10 years, even 15 years. And there are areas certainly of underutilized space that I have a feeling will probably continue to be utilized in some form. And so I hesitate to comment based on any specific development project, but I hope that covers it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I think we're now ready to hear from Chief Arradondo.
And let me just tell you, how before Chief gets on, one of the things that a major asset that we have in Minneapolis is our chief. I believe that Chief Arradondo is the best chief in the entire country. He is someone who, again, I work with every single day. We are lockstep in this work. He started as a beat officer on the north side. He's from the south side, and he understands the need to see that necessary culture shift, and he understands the need for safety. You know, I think it's most definitely, it has to be a both and approach right now. And so Chief, again, thanks for your partnership, and I'm sure we'll be talking probably 20 minutes after this call is over.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Want to stay on
Thank you.
and join the chief with any comments? That'd be great. But if not, I'll turn it over to Chief Arradondo. Rondo, go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much to the entire West Makaska Neighborhood Council. Thank you for allowing me a few minutes to be in this important space with you. I also do want to also thank Councilmember Palmisano, who has been a stalwart, a leader, her governance in our city, particularly her care and concern for community safety, as well as her leading work with officer wellness, which I have never seen quite the work of a city council member do in my 31 years here on the council. And so I want to thank her for uplifting that work.
Well said. She's
also
excellent.
Yeah, and I also need to thank, she's on the line here, but the chief of the 5th Precinct and certainly that ward, Inspector Amelia Huffman, who through her leadership and her guidance of the men and women there at the 5th Precinct, she just continues to do remarkable work. And so I want to thank her for all that she does. I'm very fortunate to be operating as serving as your chief of police with a mayor that has been very supportive in terms of what public safety should look like for the entire city. He certainly is making sure when we have our regular daily and sometimes hourly check-ins, his first question to me is, Rondo, are you doing everything that you can to keep our city safe, and what can I do to help support you in that effort? So I'm very supportive of having Mayor Frey's efforts as it relates to that. So what I would like to say is that one thing that I know that's very clear and evident is that we cannot, and when I say we, the men and women who do this very honorable and noble profession, we cannot succeed without the support, partnership, authority that all of you grant us. And so I'm so very appreciative of your group and the work that all of you do in your own lanes to help support what true community safety is for our entire city. We also, unfortunately, this year we've experienced upticks in violent crime that we have not experienced in several years, and more notably those crimes being our homicides and gunshot violence. Minneapolis, unlike actually like other cities across the country, just have been experiencing this kind of perfect storm, unfortunately, with the pandemic, as Mayor Frey had mentioned, some of the results of the civil unrest, people just in very challenging times, and then throw on that the uptick in violence that we're having. I will tell you, and as the mayor mentioned, my number one priority is to make sure that our residents, our 400,000 plus residents, our businesses and visitors are safe. And when you pick up the phone to call 911, that you will get a response from a squad car. And also, if you happen to be, unfortunately, a victim of a crime, that your case will be thoroughly investigated. Now, what the decrease in the size of our department has done is it's made me, and certainly I've been having these conversations, me and the mayor, of discussing this, but it's made our department one-dimensional, and that is not what I've wanted it to be. We have traditionally had many different units that have done great work, and whether that's through community engagement outreach, whether that's been other auxiliary investigative units to help bring those into custody who have committed harm in our communities. But I've had to decommission or deactivate those units to ensure that if members of West Makaska neighborhoods pick up that phone to call 911, that they will have a response there. As the mayor noted, that is through some of the normal attrition or separations that we've experienced, but also a significant increase in other types of separations, which the mayor was right on his numbers. We're at about 120. And again, we traditionally each year will lose roughly about 45. So you can obviously, with those numbers, and the year's not over yet, that has certainly impacted our staffing levels. The other thing I want to make note is that we know that very sadly, tragically, and unfortunately, Minneapolis on May 25th, the death of Mr. George Floyd. I knew, and I've communicated this to all of our command staff and leadership, and through the rank and file, through videos, department videos and messaging, that we will never be the same department again. We will not move back, but we will move forward. And part of that moving forward will be that we will be creating a new MPD, and we will be guided under the principles of we must first do no harm. And so what does that mean? Well, we know that harm is defined as causing someone or something to be hurt, broken, damaged, or made less valuable. We also recognize that we have, the Minneapolis Police Department, we acknowledge that we've contributed to both historical and present day trauma in this city. And that principle, again, of first do no harm, provides us a guiding light from which all of our decisions must flow. And our new Minneapolis Police Department must rest on that solid foundation of human rights and be community focused. And this has to be led, and I mentioned she's one of them, in Inspector Huffman, but this has to be led by bold, courageous, vulnerable, humble, and unapologetic leaders in forging this transformational change, and that has to occur. But we will focus also on the people. We need the right people and the leaders and influencers, regardless of the rank in this organization, to help us move this work forward, and they must be properly supported. And I will say those two words again, properly supported. Councilmember Palmisano has been very strong in that support, and we also have to have, obviously, you, members of our city, members of West Makaska neighborhood. We have to have community. That transformational change reform must be community-centered and focused. Our Creating New MPD will also focus on our processes, looking at our organizational structure that must support our department values. We must hire, discipline, train our employees in a way that is consistent with our values. We also are looking at our data. Councilmember Palmisano has also helped to lead us when we started rolling out body-worn cameras. She and the mayor worked very closely in terms of our policies with us, as well as our data technology to make sure that we were in compliance. And so we must capture and routinely provide clear, measurable information that is focused on transparency, so that all of you and your family members and loved ones, you have that, I call it the people's data, so that you have that. But I also say that we move, in the Minneapolis Police Department, we move at the speed of trust. So regardless of all the policies and trainings and other things that occur, we, each and every day, our men and women are sworn in civilian. They have to make sure that each interaction that they have with a community member here in the city of Minneapolis, that it's meaningful, that it is respectful, that they see our community as necessary in our survival and our success. And so those are some of the ways that we are going to continue to move this work forward. We are going to have some flashpoints. We are going to have, we're a community that many in the community are still grieving, and they haven't had a chance to heal. And by the way, that also means the department. Many of our men and women still here within the organization, they have taken on quite a bit over the past year, and some of the narratives that have been directed at the profession. Their families come to this journey with them as well. And so I need to make sure that I do all I can. We recognize that our communities experience layers of trauma, and that also applies to the men and women. And so I want to make sure that all of us, our officers and our community, have the support that they need to, the wellness support that they need to help really restore the vibrancy and the health and safety of this city. And so with that, I just want to say again, the strength of our public safety is really how well that we all come together, not only during the good times, but particularly during times of crisis. And there's great opportunity. I always believe that there's adversity, there's blessings through adversity. And we've got an opportunity now to create a new MPD. We've got an opportunity now to forge allyship with neighborhood organizations and private sector folks and so many others that really want us to to make the important and needed transformational change that we are doing. And the mayor has been, we've been rolling up our sleeves ever since. And by the way, we have done a lot of work even prior to May 25th. But there's more work that needs to be done, and we're committed to doing that. I need to be held accountable as chief. When things are not going right or when we can do better, I need to be held accountable. All of you are my boss. And so I need to make sure that where we're at today is not the normal future for tomorrow, that we can do better, that I will do better. And that will be the inspiration that I have each and every day as I lead the wonderful men and women of this department as we move forward. So with that, Chair, I will yield for any questions you might have.
Okay, we do have a few minutes for questions. Michelle, any online?
Haven't gotten any online, so if anyone has any questions, feel free.
Yeah, Richard.
Chief, do you have any suggestions for ways that neighborhood associations like our neighborhood council could help directly in the demanding job of enhancing community safety? I know there are neighborhood watch things, and that's something to consider, I'm sure. But are there any other ideas that you've heard of or thought of, or your staff have suggested? Thanks.
Yeah, if that's Mr. Richard who asked that question, that's a great question. And so I would say, yes, there's opportunities. One of the things that I found that's been one of the things that one of many things I haven't liked in this COVID time is that there feels, I believe that relationships are all about proximity. We've tended to lose some of that, while virtual is needed often, but it doesn't replace that one-to-one type of contact. I know that it's probably even limited Inspector Huffman in some of the regular community meetings that she hosts, but I would say, particularly right now, where some communities or some neighborhoods are feeling a sense of uncertainty, we really, any way that you can lean in, if West Makasca can lean in, continue to have those meetings that you might have kind of discontinued for a while because of COVID, continue to have those, continue to reach out to Inspector Huffman. Also, the police department doesn't have the market cornered on all solutions, and so if there are ways the mayor just mentioned, and certainly Councilmember Palmisano's talked about, that the city's financial picture it's challenging right now. If there are things that West Makasca can look at where community can help play a role in either supporting the work of the 5th Precinct or other things that community can do for that community safety alone, whether it's neighborhood patrols, there's just a variety of different things. I also know that with some of the challenges we've seen in other parts of the city, with schools being in this hybrid model, and certainly we saw it this summer, there wasn't a whole lot of park and rec activities. What are some ways that our communities and our neighbors can help look at alternatives to keep our young people positively active and engaged? And so that would be helpful, because one of the things we have seen this past year is an increase in youth getting involved in behavior that doesn't lead to any good outcomes. And so, to your question, Richard, I think that we would be absolutely open to more leaning in with you and your fellow neighbors and how we might be able to look at some creative problem solving.
Thank you. You've given us a couple agenda items there for us to pursue. Thank you so much, Chief.
Yeah, we really appreciate you taking the time to
And
spend with us.
I did get 2 more questions. I'm just going to briefly ask them quick, if that's okay. The first one is an unrelated topic. This one says, does the city have any fines if a pet owner allows their pet to do their business on private property? Obviously, the act would need to be videotaped and the dog owner known to take any meaningful action. May seem minor, however, our neighborhood has many disrespectful dog walkers.
So, wow, you would have to throw me off on that question. I would. I do believe there's some ordinances about. Boy, Inspector Huffman, can you bail your chief out here if you know the answer to that? Maybe not.
I can jump in on that one.
Oh, okay.
I couldn't get unmuted there. So in a situation like that with an issue where the incident is happening on private property, we don't see a lot of calls related to that, but if we did, I think we would handle it like a citizen's arrest situation where the person who actually witnessed the violation would need to step forward and say that they would like to make a citizen's arrest. In this case, issuing a citation is what would happen in an incident like that.
Perfect. I appreciate the responses here and for your feedback too, Amelia. And then the last question that I have is that we appreciate your sense of accountability. Based on the limited understanding of how things work, I think your hands are tied to make any material or meaningful changes. What do you suggest a normal citizen should be doing to help affect meaningful change?
That's a great question. And so one is, I'm all about hope and optimism, and so I don't look at my hands as being tied. Sometimes it's just I have to find a different route, and so I lean on others, whether it's the mayor, whether it's the city attorney's office, to help find another navigation route. But I would say, you know, I've often was told by my grandmother, my dear grandmother, used to always say, the world is run by those who show up. Show up. West Makaska neighbors show up when it's council meetings, when it's public safety meetings. Show up. Let your voices be heard. When it's budget time, show up. Let your voices be heard. And not just when there's triggering events, but routinely throughout the year. Make sure that we, Inspector Huffman, myself, if there's pressing issues or trending problems within your communities, or wonderful things that you're doing that, you know, we might be able to look at and try to replicate in other places throughout the city, please continue to do that. And so I think that's how we'll accomplish it together. And so, and you'll be amazed where you can find your allies. And so that's a great question. And so hopefully that answers that.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for spending a busy evening with us, Chief Arradondo. Really appreciate answering our questions.
Thank you so very much. And whenever the group would like to have me back, by all means, I'd be more than welcome. So thank you all, and Councilmember Palmisano, thank you.
Next on our agenda is County Commissioner Marion Green. Marion has represented West Makaska on the Hennepin County Commission since 2014 and is now chair of the commission. Marion has been a leader in addressing the COVID crisis in our county and also in seeking solutions to the rise in homelessness that the pandemic has caused. Marion, I hope you're able to join us now and give us an update on some of these issues of concern.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you. I've had some computer issues today, so I'm delighted. Well, thank you so much for that kind introduction. And thanks everybody for being here. I'm Marion Green. I'm your county commissioner. I also happen to be chair of the board, and it's been an unusual year. I think that's an understatement. The county is, you know, apropos of the relationship with the federal government and federal funding, the county gets to lead a lot of the regional response because we were allocated $230 million by the feds, and we are spending that as fast as we can on housing support, small business support, support to assisted living facilities, for testing, masks, in myriad ways. We're also working to help kids with connectivity so that kids can remain connected to school. So we have, as usual for Hennepin County, I would say we have our fingers in lots of different pies. And in that work, I just want to thank the mayor and Councilmember Palmisano for the close partnership that we've had in our work together and that we continue to have. Very grateful for that. And it was nice to hear what the mayor had to say this evening. A couple special topics that I'll mention because it's fall 2020 is the census. As you probably heard, the deadline for filing for the census has been extended to October 31st. And if you need any information, please contact me or my office. You may have heard that there's an election this year. And if you haven't registered to vote, it's not too late. And of course, you can register on election day as well. There are 2 vote centers for Minneapolis. One is run by the city, and it's in Northeast. It's on East Hennepin, just just west of 35W, where 35W crosses Hennepin, sort of north of downtown. And then also the county government center. There's a vote center there. The county has also added a couple ballot drop-off locations. You can drop your completed absentee ballot at either of the locations that I just named, but we're also running some drive-through drop-off spots also in downtown. And if you need any of that information, please contact me or my office, and I'll put my email and phone number in the chat. I also want to just give a plug for my office's newsletter, which has a lot of this information and a lot of information in general for how the county can help. You know, everybody in our community is going through a lot with the pandemic, with the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd. And I just want you to know that the county is here for you in any way that we can be responsive to your needs. And my office looks forward to being helpful in any way that we can be. Perhaps I could use the remainder of my time for questions and hear what's on your minds.
Sure. We have any online questions?
Nothing online.
Okay. Any members of the public wish to ask a
Someone
question?
mentioned the homeless problem. Have you got any thoughts about that?
Yes. So the county has expanded our shelter capacity to levels never seen before. We did that actually in March and April as soon as the pandemic arrived. And in fact, we are really glad that we haven't had that the disease has not sort of ripped through the homeless population because of some of the actions that we took. We do still have shelter beds, both for families and for single adults, that are empty every night. And our teams continue to do outreach at the encampments in the hopes that people will choose to go to a shelter rather than choosing to camp out. It's very difficult, and you may be familiar that there's a gubernatorial executive order that prevents the disruption of encampments in order to prevent the spread of the disease. We are finding that in cases where safety, either physical safety or public health safety and well-being is threatened, we are needing to move along encampments and encourage people to go to shelter. But it's a very difficult situation, and I guess I'll leave it at that. Is that specific enough? Because I'd be very happy to talk with further specificity if there's interest.
No, I think, thank you for that answer. And
Okay, we have a couple more coming in the chat. Thank you for that answer. The first one is, can we make Excelsior safer for walking and biking, especially in the winter?
Oh my goodness, wouldn't I like to do that? And Excelsior, I think of as an extension of Lake Street, which somebody talked about the density on Lake Street and the car traffic, which also makes it very difficult or unattractive for walking and biking. I would love to see us sort of reconsider Lake Street and Excelsior as county roads, and I would say it's in the cards, but not anytime soon in terms of our capital investment plan. But as we see apartment buildings go up, condo buildings go up, and the density increase, I think that the situation will become more and more urgent. And I share your concern that they are not safe streets for walking and biking. And even if you feel as if you're comfortably removed from traffic, you always are aware of the traffic right near you, so it's unpleasant at a minimum.
Right, and so on that note, related to that was a lot of people access Excelsior from West 32nd and more will be moving in, and that there needs to be better sidewalks and crossings. And then there was also a request to clarify what you mean by reconsider.
So the crossings and sidewalks, well, anytime that the county improves the road, we do it very much in partnership with the city. And I will say that crossings, sidewalks, lighting, and so on are very much in partnership with the city. So both of us, both the city of Minneapolis and Hennepin County, need to sort of step up on that. Reconsider, I'm not honestly sure exactly where I use that word, but I could imagine I used it in the context of what our capital improvement plan is, which is set 5 years out. Each year we consider adding, we do add a small handful of projects that sort of get in the pipeline for that 5th year out. And we'll continue to consider Lake Street and Excelsior as part of the consideration of projects. I will say that I've been advocating extremely vociferously to get Lyndale Avenue on the 5-year capital improvement plan, because as scary as Lake Street is, Lyndale Avenue is scarier and the statistics are worse. And so I really want to see that street added to the plan as well.
Thank you for that answer. And then there was just a comment here that says the Supreme Court just today sided with Trump to end the census today.
Oh, thank you for the update. No wonder it was a bad day. Sorry, that was not perky. I'm here to rally you and tell you what a great city and county we have.
I hadn't heard that either. Well, thank you so much.
Appreciate spending time with us again.
Absolutely. Please be in touch with my office. I'll put my email and phone number here in the chat. And thanks so much to everybody who's on the call. What we're finding, I think, both at the city and the county, is that the region has been resilient compared to many regions. And that has to do with the amount of sort of connection and participation and investment that people feel in their community. And in Minneapolis, that's expressed through really vital neighborhood organizations such as this one. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Richard just raised the point that we've actually, as you know, been in communication on the Excelsior issue for the last couple of years, especially the sidewalks, which are not suitable for people with disabilities. So this is something that we'll continue to talk about.
Perfect, thanks. And there was also a comment that said the county should definitely reconsider Excelsior Boulevard improvements for biking and walking. And then there was another comment too saying thank you to the commissioner, and Lyndale is also important. I cross it almost every day on my way to the garden plot.
We've actually had, in the past few years, we have had both the city and the county officials in charge of the Americans with Disabilities Act. In compliance with that, we had them in the neighborhood looking at the sidewalks on Excelsior, and they gave us the news that probably it's a matter of some years before there would be major reworking. Sad to say, but that was the most recent message we got. I see Lene is here.
Right, yes. Hi, Lene. Yeah, you're our final speaker of the evening, and you've been a regular at our board meetings, and you've also kept the neighborhood informed through your Hamasana Presents events, which I hope we can hold in person again once this pandemic ends. So with that, if you'd like to. How are you?
Sure, I'll just say a few words. I feel like the mayor and then the chief took a lot of my talking points, but then they also got a lot of my questions too, huh? Congratulations, West McCoska. I have the pleasure of educating all of my colleagues on how to say the name of your neighborhood. We do a little jig with it, and it is catching. So thank you for that. Thank you for all of the hard work and intentionality with which you produced that name and the the kind of consensus building that you did as a neighborhood. So thank you. Let's see, for those of you who don't have a chance to see me at Everyday West McCoska neighborhood meetings, I do often come with an update on many topics. The chief and the mayor covered them. I'll just kind of save time for questions of what people want to talk about. I will share that my last conversation with Marion Green included a conversation about how we revisit Excelsior and Lake and what it would take to revisit the conversation of speed limits as we move as a city toward the Vision Zero initiatives, where so many of our side streets that go off of Lake and Excelsior become 20 or 25 miles an hour, mostly 20. That's a huge adjustment, especially given the actual median speed on those streets. For those of you that have been involved in the conversation for a long time, like Richard Logan, you will recall that one of the ways we'd have to reconsider the notion of changing the speed limit on these streets would involve a speed study. And while the city does speed studies and maybe decides to make like structural barriers and other kinds of improvements, the county, I think they're beholden, I don't know if it's because it's the way they've always done it or if they're beholden to a larger standard that's like a state law. But in the past, the way the county does streets is to create streets for flow, right? So it is very possible to do a speed study if the speed is seen as much higher than normal, that the county's engineering technical recommendation would be to increase the speed of your street, which, as you know, is 35 miles per hour on Excelsior, just west, on the western edge of Minneapolis. So I want to be careful about how to approach that that analysis and that fight, but I also am very interested in taking another whack at it. I've been up to date from people like Jeff Flake on some of the crime stats and such of your neighborhood. I think Inspector Huffman was on here. I have stats to share if people are interested, but you can also look that up yourselves on insidempd.com. I think you heard the chief and the mayor speak more meaningfully as to kind of the kinds of things we're doing to address crime and violence in our city. And I know you all are concerned about it, and I'm concerned too. Let's see. What else would you like me to talk about? I'll just go for questions. You see me a lot, so I don't feel like I need to give you my budget update or my police update or any of these other kinds of things. Speed limits and roundabouts, yes. So I don't know about roundabouts. We'd have to talk about that with the county. Some of the best pedestrian level improvements that I've heard about and been able to advocate for is frankly like with the property owners, for example, of the Jiffy Lube station on Excelsior. And what's that cross street right there? Is that Abbott?
Yes.
They know that they would need to bury the lines to do any sort of development activity there. And that would be a big improvement for the neighborhood. It would be a big improvement for the pedestrian space, for the sidewalk area. And they know that they would need to expand that area of Excelsior Boulevard. But I know that there's pros and cons of that, right? I understand the sensitivity to development in general. But I do think that probably sooner than the county would take efforts to do some of the curb work and other kinds of improvements, just based on the risk factors of other competing projects, even in the city, not just around the county, that we will probably see the most amount of pedestrian improvement with development initiatives. And so I do work closely. You've all met and been presented to by Paul Miller. And he and I stay close on where we can try and get any amount of negotiating power for pedestrian improvements. And it's something that people who own private property in this area are very interested in as well. Let's see, I was I'm also, some of it's flying by, but in the Zoom group chat, there was a question about a community and vegetable garden site. You know, I really like that idea. The area in the Southwest Master Plan, as Commissioner Forney and I were just texting back and forth, she reminded me was the Southwest Area Master Plan goes as far as Lake and France. And Lake and France is an area that we walk past every year on the annual pedestrian safety walk, and talk about opportunities there. One of those opportunities is for very affordable housing in the place that's currently the bus turnaround, and there's a lot of county property there. There's a little bit that's owned by the city, but there's a lot of setup work that would need to be done. But the vision for that area, in part from you all over the years, includes a park, and some kind of a park. And it seems to me that some kind of a community garden would be both inexpensive in relative terms and also something that's so much desired by people that live in West Makaska and beyond, and across the street, etc. Particularly people who are in multi-family housing, right? And who don't have yards of their own.
No. Thank you so much for that. And then there was
Michelle,
another. Yeah.
can I speak?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, this is Paul Legler. First of all, thank you for mentioning the need for a park there, and we would hope you would continue to support that as we move ahead with that plan. The other question would be in regard to sidewalks. We've talked in the past about the need for sidewalks, in particular, people getting off the bus stop on West Lake Street and Drew, and they walk up a block, but then from there they have to walk in the street, which is very dangerous, particularly in the winter, and then up Ewing. And I know you're aware of the need for sidewalks there. Have you been able to make any progress with the city on that?
I honestly forget where we left it off. We made a few steps forward after the last time we spoke about it. I don't remember where it is.
The last I recall was that you were going to talk to the appropriate people at the city about making it more of a priority, moving it up on the list of places that would be a priority for sidewalks.
That part of it ended up as a dead end because there is no sidewalk changes or improvements or repairs scheduled for my entire ward for the next 2 years. So I was trying to do it a little faster than that. And sometimes with the interest of, of abutting adjacent property owners, so the property ownership of that apartment building and others, there's a way to kind of make that happen as its own project, right? That's assessed in full, but there might be other ways that we could get some small amounts of funding for such.
Yeah, I hope we can have further conversations about that, because there's a lot of new development up on the hill there. There's the Metric Apartments now that have just opened up with 49 units. They have a little sidewalk in front of their place, but then it just ends, doesn't go anyplace. But I would think with a lot of the new housing up there on the hill that there would be an increased need and increased want for the sidewalks to connect that to the bus stop.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. I promise to bring you an update, a more fulsome update by your next neighborhood meeting on that.
Thank you.
There's in the group chat, I'll just mention that Commissioner Forney has added in some detail about, I assume that's the west side of Bedeh-Makaska.
Yes.
Yep. There we go. That's all I got. Any other questions?
There was just one suggestion that came in privately that had mentioned, why not reduce Excelsior to 3 lanes with the 3rd lane as a center turn only lane, and then Excelsior overall could be narrowed and the sidewalks widened.
Yeah, well, the city controls traffic in that corridor. The county makes the decisions on that road, and I don't mean to pass that back to Commissioner Green. But we have these kinds of conversations also about 50th Street, right? 50th Street, for those that travel on it, is a county road all the way up to France Avenue, and then it becomes the City of Edina Street. So the City of Edina can make different choices about how traffic flows on it, and they certainly have. I think that there's certainly great ideas there that I would like to map and make almost symmetrical. And similarly, with Excelsior Boulevard, whether it's a center turn lane or whether it's more of a planted boulevard like the City of St. Louis Park has done, that has certainly helped and assisted speeding issues just west of us on Excelsior Boulevard. I don't see those same kinds of changes happening with center turn lanes on other streets, but ultimately we are going to need the buy-in of the county to do any kinds of these changes. So I invite us to be able to work together better and more. It just hasn't, as much as I have tried to get it to be a priority of the counties to look at and focus on as a project, there are, as you heard Commissioner Green say, other more urgent needs like Lindale Avenue. Doesn't mean I'm going to stop working on it.
Yeah,
Awesome. Thank you. And then
I know that I haven't heard discussion of making Excelsior 3 lanes in the past, but I know the county has looked into narrower lanes, allowing more room for sidewalks and boulevards, and basically traffic calming as an alternative. But again, some of that is in the multimodal study, but the money isn't there yet. So it's a question of pushing it up in terms of a priority for spending when there is funding available.
Awesome, thank you. There was a comment that came through on an unrelated note. Thank you for the discussion on that. Is there any law or ordinance requiring an apartment building landlord or manager to inform tenants that there have been other residents testing positive for COVID?
I did look into that. That was a question that has come up in the past. The answer is no. It's private data. Yes, there's the state's version of contact tracing. That contact tracing would, and when it works ideally, I've had a lot of, to be candid, personal experiences with people that I know that have tested positive and haven't gotten that call from the health department at the state until like weeks later, and perhaps they were just behind. But no, I don't believe that if a resident tests positive that a whole building would be made aware of such a thing. That said, when you look at the very specific level of maps that had been that our health department had been sharing, your neighborhood was one of, continued to be, the last I saw it, which was honestly a couple of months ago, but had been one of the lowest levels of COVID positive tests across the city. I know that's cold comfort, but no, I think that private health data was the answer that I got as to why they wouldn't let property owners know or supers know, and thus building managers to inform other residents in that building. I'm hoping that Richard Logan, who is raising his hand a lot, knows more. Richard.
No, it's just that the question doesn't ask to reveal the identity of a person who tests positive, but simply has to do with informing people that the virus is in the building.
Yeah.
And that's still covered. What you said still applies to that.
It would be up to a resident themselves to let them know, but my understanding is there is no, that the state health department or the people doing the contact tracing services, right? The people who you hear on NPR, is Dan Huff, who used to work at the city, that they are not, that's not a part of their protocol. It would be good to know.
Public health.
All right, and Victoria does have her hand raised if she could speak next.
Yeah, we do have 2 cases of COVID, or have had, at Calhoun Towers. In both cases, they were self-reported by the resident to the management office, which then communicated the fact to the building. And so one of my neighbors did some research and called the state health department to find out if, as a case is identified and they know that that person lives in a multiple unit dwelling, is the state responsible for calling the building owner and telling them? And the answer was no, from the state. So in both cases, literally, we only know because they were self-reported by the resident, and also the resident stated that they were following the quarantine rules. So hopefully we assume if they were responsible enough to inform the building, that they're also responsible enough to obey the quarantine restrictions. But you know, you don't know. And as Pam and I were talking about, we could have more cases in the building. We just don't know it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something, I mean, maybe something to include in some of the communications that you're developing. Self-reporting is really helpful. I get there's potential stigma attached, but some of the benefits of self-reporting is, gosh, you know, what a neighborhood you live in. I know and have, you know, firsthand knowledge of all these stories of residents around here where somebody, whether it's a neighbor or whether it's the person on the other side of their duplex or beyond, informs, you know, a neighbor or a building property manager that they are COVID positive. And boy, the outpouring of support of people who want to help them make sure they have groceries, basically help them make sure they're able to maintain a safe quarantine without it being too onerous. I mean, that's something that a community comes together and does in really great fashion.
I think that's a really good point, Linnea. I will add that to the messaging notes for the social campaign.
That I'll say, as a person who just tested positive, that has been my experience, that I've had lots of lovely people offering help. And I have 3 boys at home, so, and they have all tested negative. I'm fine, but it's been didn't want to have it, but it's, my experience has been that very neighborly. So thanks.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linnea.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending even more than the 10 minutes we had you penciled in for. Appreciate all your answers.
All good. Yep. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
So, Linnea being our last speaker, I think we are done for the evening.
Alan, just
yes.
Yes, sorry everyone. I did put what I was going to report to you in the chat. I do though want to just say to all of you how grateful I am, whether or not it was a burden for you, or shall I say a pleasure, I don't know, whatever, a relief and everything. The fact that the parkways were closed. I am just really appreciative of our staff for being so, shall I say, inventive, reinventing themselves as to how we've been able to respond to COVID, to all of the various crises that we've had this past year. The encampments have been something that is, you know, housing isn't in any of our staff job description, and I just applaud them. And once again, I appreciate that we did have the closures, and for those of you who might have suffered through it, I'm sorry, but I feel that the majority of people did feel it was a very positive thing for us to be able to do. So everybody be safe. Thank you.
Meg, this is Paul Egler. Last week, I listened to the public hearing on the Southwest Master Plan for new parks. I was probably the only person listening because the vice presidential debate was that evening, but I did hear that you supported the park that we're proposing in our neighborhood at the corner of West Lake Street and South France. So I just wanted to express my appreciation for you mentioning that and for your support of that, and hope you will continue to support that as we move forward.
Thank you, and as Lene indicated, she and I are on the same page. In fact, staff, park staff and everything, looks at it as a wonderful challenge. We all know that there's very limited land in the city, and that we are going to be needing to figure out how do we use limited space, you know, do we make plazas, whatever, for the recreational needs of our residents. So they're excited, and the fact that Councilmember Palmisano has indicated a strong interest in working together. Hopefully the county will also participate, and we can make that actually happen.
Thank you.
Awesome. And then there's some comments coming in that the closures were appreciated and people seconding that. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, Meg. I think
Thank
that,
you very much, Meg.
yeah, concludes, I think Chris wants to close up the Bakken for the night, so we will be adjourning. Thank you all, residents and speakers.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody else,
Everybody.
know that Meg Swanee has been a public servant for decades in this area. We appreciate it very much.
Former member of our board.
A former member of this board.